We apologize for interrupting your doom scrolling. Now, for some positive leftist news.
Welcome to Positive Leftist News, your monthly dose of radical hope in a world that needs much more of it. I'm your host, Mexi, and I'm excited to be reporting on important wins from Palestinian solidarity groups, workers, and environmental activists worldwide. Organizing works, folks, so without further ado, let's get inspired. Responding to mounting pressure from Palestinian rights organizations, Canada is moving closer to an arms embargo on Israel. On Tuesday, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly announced that she has taken action to limit Canadian weapons sales to Israel. She stated that Canada has now suspended about 30 existing permits for weapons to Israel, and that the government is opposed to the deal for 50,000 Quebec-made highly explosive mortars to be sent to the Israeli military via the United States. This is a huge step forward that wouldn't have been possible without pressure from Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, the Arms Embargo Now network, and the tens of thousands of people that are part of Palestinian solidarity organizations or support their campaigns. As encouraging as this is, more needs to be done to achieve a full arms embargo on Israel, including concrete action for all of our existing permits to be cancelled. But Joly's statement was unusually strong in asserting that Canada will not have any form of arms or parts of arms be sent to Gaza, period. PLN hopes to have more good news to share on this front soon. On September 4th, Portland, Maine became the fourth U.S. city to divest from Israeli bonds, Israeli-owned businesses, and companies that profit from weapons sales or illegal settlements in Israel. The decision, passed by the Portland City Council, was driven by advocacy from the Maine Coalition for Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace's state chapter. The resolution states that the city of Portland recognizes the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza and seeks to avoid economically supporting this crisis through the city's financial investments. Portland, the largest city in Maine, is the first on the East Coast to take such action, joining Richmond, California, Hayward, California, and Hamtramck, Michigan. This divestment movement comes on the heels of various city resolutions calling for ceasefires in Palestine. Activists across the U.S. are pushing for more local governments to sever financial ties with the genocidal state. Advocates say that Portland's victory may serve as a catalyst for similar efforts nationwide. On September 3rd, masses in Turkey, led by the Turkish Communist Party, took to the streets near Izmir port to protest the arrival of the U.S. Navy amphibious assault ship USS Wasp. The ship's presence followed a joint military exercise between the U.S. and Turkey in the Mediterranean, which sparked outrage among Turkish political groups and activists who oppose U.S. imperialism. Protesters holding signs and chanting "Yankee Go Home" condemned the Turkish government's military cooperation with the U.S., which they believe indirectly supports Israel's actions in Gaza. "We do not want the U.S. ship that brought war and death to Palestine and Izmir," declared the DKP. "The ports of our country cannot be the supply and logistics point of the imperialists." San Francisco State University has pulled investments from 3 companies linked to arms manufacturing following pressure from pro-Palestinian student groups. The SF State Foundation confirmed it had sold its holdings in defense giants Lockheed Martin, Italian firm Leonardo, and U.S. tech company Palantir Technologies, which has worked with the Israeli Defense Ministry. The divestment came after a summer of discussions between university representatives and activists from Students for Gaza and the General Union of Palestine Students. The work group, which included students, faculty, and foundation members, proposed a revised investment policy that aims to avoid investing in companies involved in severe human rights violations. Students hailed the decision as a major victory. SFG said in an Instagram post, "Through the work of many students involved in GUPS and SFG, we have been able to successfully ensure our money is not funding genocide." The Foundation's investment committee has already acted on the policy, removing the companies from its portfolio, with a formal vote on the revised investment strategy expected in December. Congratulations and our heartfelt thanks to the organizers. A Crown Court jury has refused to convict 4 Palestine Action activists accused of causing over £500,000 in damage at a factory in West Yorkshire, disrupting the production of missile parts for Israel. The activists, charged with criminal damage at Teledyne Defense and Space in Shipley, used sledgehammers to smash the roof, windows, and interior of the facility. During the trial, the activists argued that their actions were a necessary response to Israel's military actions in Gaza, citing the deaths of more than 40,000 Palestinians. Ruby Hamill, one of the activists, stated, "This country has had a hand in these crimes from the beginning, and it is therefore our duty to stop them." The activists, who represented themselves, reminded jurors of their right to acquit based on conscience. This tactic, along with the refusal to follow the judge's directions, led the jury to fail to reach a majority decision on a conviction. A retrial is set for February 2026, offering another opportunity to, in the activists' words, expose who the real criminals are. We will put links to letter-writing campaigns and legal defense fundraisers in the show notes, and will follow up on the story in the new year. Over 15,000 activists gathered in Ostend, Belgium for ManiFiesta 2024, a two-day festival aimed at strengthening international solidarity, addressing inequalities, and mobilizing support for global justice. Organized by the Workers' Party of Belgium and various left-wing movements, the event featured debates, cultural performances, and activism. The PTB president opened the event by condemning growing inequality and attacks on workers' rights in Belgium, promising action from his party. A key focus of the festival was building solidarity with Palestine. Omar Barghouti, co-founder of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS movement, stressed that solidarity is not charity or simply a spirit, but a shared responsibility to challenge complicity in Israel's actions. The event featured testimonies from healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza, alongside artists like Low Key, all advocating for Palestinian liberation. The role of trade unions was another major theme. British MP Jeremy Corbyn emphasized their importance in promoting peace and challenging neoliberalism, while United Auto Workers President Sean Fain urged unions to empower workers against corporate greed, stating people want to work, but they also want a life outside of work. As ManiFiesta concluded, participants left energized for future mobilizations across Europe, from labor strikes to protests in support of Palestine. The event served as both a celebration of solidarity and a call to action in the fight for a more just and equitable world. After organizing a 10-month rent strike, a group of over 100 tenants in Toronto are celebrating what they've called a huge victory. Tenants of the Lawrence Avenue buildings collectively withheld rent payments to seek urgent repairs in dozens of units, and the withdrawal of applications the landlord filed with the board to increase rent above provincial guidelines. Tenants said that they had done everything they could to resolve the issue before withholding rent, from sending petitions, trying to meet with the landlord, speaking with local politicians, and making calls to the city, all to no avail. But following the strike, the Landlord and Tenant Board has issued an interim order for Barney River Investments to do immediate maintenance work and the requested long-needed repairs, and a final decision on the rent increase is pending. Ricardo Tranjan, a political economist at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, said every victory, every win of a tenant group is a win for the tenants class. Since May 2023, Toronto has seen a wave of rent strikes with hundreds of renters withholding rent across the city. In this neo-feudal housing market, tenant organizing is crucial and powerful. When I say tenant, you say power. Tenant. Tenant. All right. In another good housing story, Greater Manchester will become the first region in the UK to adopt a housing first strategy modeled by Finland. Housing First gives people homes when they need them without conditions attached, and has brought down homelessness by 70% in Finland, eradicating poverty-based homelessness. Mayor Andy Burnham has been focused on reducing homelessness since 2017, along with donating 15% of his monthly income to a homeless charity. After running a successful pilot for a Housing First scheme in Greater Manchester, which supported 430 people with varied experiences of homelessness, Burnham is bidding for government funding to extend it beyond the current deadline of March 2025. In addition to offering people permanent homes in the area of their choice, Greater Manchester Housing First offers intensive wraparound support to help people regain control of their lives. The only sane way to end homelessness, housing as a human right. Fantastic news that we hope to see replicated. Over 10,000 hotel workers across the United States went on strike during the busy Labor Day weekend, calling for fair wages, better working conditions, and a reversal of COVID-era staffing cuts. Organized by the Unite Here union, the strikes hit major hotels across 9 cities, including Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, and Honolulu, with workers targeting chains like Hilton, Hyatt, and Marriott. Workers argued that while hotels have made record profits and charged high room rates, employees have not benefited. Many report struggling to make ends meet, with some having to work multiple jobs. "One job should be enough" has become the rallying cry of the strike. Gwen Mills, Unite Here International president, said the hotel industry is making record profits while workers and guests are left behind. Workers aren't making enough to support their families. We won't accept a new normal where hotels profit by cutting services and abandoning commitments to workers. Strikers have urged guests to avoid hotels where strikes are ongoing until new contracts are secured. The energy from this strike is spreading, with additional walkouts happening as we speak. PLM will be watching as the strike develops. A major strike involving 17,000 AT&T workers across the U.S. South concluded following the ratification of new contracts. The strike, which began on August 16th, was organized by the Communications Workers of America. The newly agreed upon contracts address key issues raised during the strike. In the Southeast, the 5-year deal provides a 19% wage increase across the board, with additional raises for wire technicians and utility operations. It also stabilizes healthcare premiums for the first year and reduces them in subsequent years. For AT&T West, which includes 8,500 workers in California and Nevada, the 4-year agreement offers a retroactive wage increase of 15% and improvements in overtime and scheduling. CWA President Claude Cummings Jr. praised the unity of the union members, stating, "I believe in the power of unity, and the unity our members and retirees have shown during these contract negotiations has been outstanding." He added that this collective determination and support was crucial in achieving the strong contracts. Remember, folks, the union makes us strong. On August 30th, thousands of Americans sent 800 tons of flour to Cuba through the Let Cuba Live Bread for Our Neighbors campaign, organized by US-based activists. This initiative, led by the People's Forum, aims to mitigate the severe impact of US sanctions and the ongoing blockade against Cuba. The campaign, which has been in preparation for months, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from over 1,300 donors. The concept of the campaign is simple. Cuba is our neighbor, and we can't let our neighbors go hungry, said Manolo de los Santos, executive director of the People's Forum. This hunger is imposed directly by the White House, and Biden could end it right away by allowing Cuba to trade freely. The campaign faced substantial hurdles in sourcing the flour. Activists reported that they contacted 14 U.S. grain producers without success. Consequently, the flour had to be shipped from Turkey, encountering delays due to U.S. policies that complicate Cuba's foreign trade. The Bread for Our Neighbors activists described these challenges as part of a broader strategy to create desperation among the Cuban people, highlighting the brutal consequences of the sanctions. Despite these obstacles, the successful delivery of the flour represents a significant act of solidarity and support from thousands of individuals across the U.S. Honduran President Xiomara Castro has announced the suspension of the extradition agreement with the United States. The decision, made on August 28th, reflects growing tensions between the two countries. The controversy began when the American ambassador to Honduras criticized Honduran officials for meeting with Venezuelan government members, some of whom have been sanctioned by the U.S. Critics of the agreement argue that it infringes on national sovereignty and is often used for political purposes. Castro wrote in a post, "The interference and interventionism of the United States, as well as its intention to direct the politics of Honduras through its embassy and other representatives, is intolerable. They attack, disregard, and violate with impunity the principles and practices of international law, which promote the respect for the sovereignty and self-determination of peoples, non-intervention, and universal peace. Enough. Based on our Constitution and international treaties, I have ordered the Chancellor Enrique Reina to denounce the extradition treaty with the United States." The decision has garnered support from various Latin American leaders. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel expressed solidarity with Castro, urging an end to U.S. meddling. Former Bolivian President Evo Morales also backed Castro, condemning what he described as destabilization efforts by the U.S. As tensions escalate, the international community will be watching closely to see how the U.S. responds to these developments. More than 2,000 protesters successfully blocked a planned appearance by Bernd Höcke, the fascist leader of the Alternative for Germany party in Jena. The demonstration, organized by the Stop the Shift to the Right Alliance, aimed to prevent Höcke from addressing a public forum at the Lisa Community Center. Despite the large turnout, the event faced significant challenges. Witnesses reported that Haka's car attempted to force its way through the blockade, with some accounts claiming the vehicle purposely hit demonstrators. The police, who were on site to try and ensure that the fascists had a platform, used pepper spray and batons to disperse the crowd, resulting in injuries. The Alliance also accused the police of facilitating the convoy's movement through the demonstration. In spite of all the help they gave the fascist party, the police reported that the protests were larger than expected, leading to the cancellation of Haka's appearance due to security reasons. In spite of the valiant effort of German anti-fascists, the AfD did manage to win the state-level election in Thüringen. We nevertheless covered the story to highlight the growing and increasingly important anti-fascist movement in Germany that remains determined to not let the AfD win at the national level. Solidarity with the Alliance. And this last story is two good news items in one. The UK's largest community-owned wind farm is using 4/5 of its £900,000 annual profits to fund the planting of 1 million native trees in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. The Scottish wind farm owns three 3-megawatt turbines, which generate up to 30 gigawatt-hours of power each year, enough to supply all the Western Isles with electricity. Multinational green energy schemes generally employ only a handful of staff and engineers, whereas community ownership allows people to capture the profits they produce and reinvest them locally. The Western Isles Woodland Project, which the wind farm is funding, hopes to restore biodiversity across the islands by using vacant or underused crops to reforest the Hebrides. Callum MacDonald, the former Labour MP leading the project, said, "I would love to use the green energy revolution to get a lot more long-term benefits for our communities." Friends, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to mexi@protonmail.com. Thank you to Javi for the Positive News Jams. Thank you to Cosmo for the Positive News background. Thank you to Catherine and myself for script writing and production, and me again for hosting and editing this one. Wow! If you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews, or you can give us a one-time tip. The link is in the description box below.